Paper Mario Color Splash is okay. I mean, it's pretty to look at and the exploration is pretty good. But man, that combat is real bad. It's a step down from what Paper Mario's developer, Intelligent Systems, has created before. Regardless of where you stand on Color Splash, the most common criticism has been the very flawed battle system. This comes from how Nintendo and Intelligent Systems have tried to step away from the series' RPG roots, while still holding on to core systems that fall apart without those roots in place. In a nutshell, Color Splash and its predecessor Sticker Star use a light turn-based combat system where attacks are done with disposable items. It's a departure from the more traditional turn-based combat of the original Paper Mario and its GameCube sequel, The Thousand Year Door. But the two styles have some similarities. Let's call the two styles Classic Paper Mario for the two older games, and Modern Paper Mario for the two newer ones. The fundamentals of Modern Paper Mario are not that different from Classic Paper Mario, but the quality suffers from the simplifications. The combat of Color Splash and Sticker Star lack in 4 key areas: engagement, depth, customization, and incentive. Let's start with engagement. A good combat system gets players engaged, something that Color Splash fails to do for 2 reasons: action commands and health. Action commands are a defining aspect of Mario RPGs. For every attack that the player uses or defends against, a little button prompt or minigame appears. Succeed and attacks become more powerful, or your defense improves. Classic Paper Mario used action commands perfectly. They were varied and just short enough to keep battles active without being too tedious. In Classic Paper Mario, action commands had variety. You might pull the stick back, hold buttons, draw, shoot targets, and more. But in Modern Paper Mario, it's just timed presses, timed presses, timed presses, mash, and more timed presses. It's a big reason why combat is so damn tedious in Color Splash. Even the UI in Color Splash is a downgrade. It takes 5 to 6 inputs for an action that should only take 2. When all attacks are performed the same way, it makes battles blend together, and your engagement in any one battle will drop. It's not just action commands that make battles more tedious. Changes in how the health system is handled make for a worse experience as well. One thing I love about Classic Paper Mario was the use of low damage numbers in combat. Unlike more traditional RPGs like Final Fantasy or Persona, which use huge arbitrary numbers for damage, every individual point of damage matters, and you get a better sense of how powerful you and your opponent really are. Seeing an 8 show up for a big attack when smaller ones show a 2 or 3 gives some real weight to those big attacks. The way Classic Paper Mario used low damage numbers made fights more engaging, as it let the player do the mental math to figure out the most efficient way to win. Combine the small damage numbers with an armor system that subtracts damage from each hit, and all of a sudden attacks feel very different from each other. For example, multi-hit moves like Bow's Smack might have higher damage output, but they are weak against enemies with high defenses, where moves with big single strikes are more effective. A simpler battle system lets the player think more deeply about what is actually happening in combat. None of these systems apply to Color Splash. Enemies don't have health bars and your attacks don't display damage numbers. Enemy damage is only indicated by their color draining. It's a fun idea and a cool visual motif, but it doesn't actually give the player a good sense of how strong their attacks really are. It's all for nothing anyway, because most enemies will go down in a single attack. I mean, for goodness sake, a normal Shy Guy goes down on the first strike of your weakest jump, which then will stomp him 5 extra times just to rub it in. I honestly can't tell if there's a difference in damage between the normal jump and the hop slipper. I mean, the enemy's still super dead. I just had to press the button a bit more. Color Splash took out information and made its action commands tedious, which makes the game's combat feel mindless, and because of that, one of the strong suits in Classic Paper Mario becomes a chore, something to just get out of the way instead of something fun. Color Splash and Sticker Star's combat don't fail because they're too easy. They fail because there is so little to consider. Classic Paper Mario games aren't exactly challenging, but they aren't really pushovers, and they definitely aren't mindless. They gave you a ton of different options in combat, from normal attacks, special moves, items, star powers, and partners. Your options were complemented with plenty of enemy types, plus your limited pool of FP made you mix up your tactics. Part of the fun in combat was finding the most efficient strategies. Your options in Sticker Star and Color Splash mostly come down to either jump, hammer, heal, or thing. Yeah, thing. Just like classic Paper Mario, you do have to pay some attention to how enemies are set up, but it doesn't really mean much. There's practically no strategy to combat because 4 out of 5 times you can win the fight in your first turn. There just isn't enough time spent for a complex strategy to play out, and the simple strategy works just as well anyway. If the fight just happens to be too hard, try using one of your zillion thing cards that will literally win the fight for you. Most of your overpowered attacks don't really have any real limitations, unless you count the paint system. Similar to mana or magic points, classic Paper Mario limited the player's power with FP or flower points, which is there to prevent you from spamming your most powerful abilities. Intelligent Systems made an effort to strip out RPG elements in Sticker Star by getting rid of FP entirely, and instead made attacks inventory based. This was often cited as one of the most frustrating aspects of the game. Color Splash would try to make the system less frustrating by making items more plentiful, and tried to balance it with a pseudo FP system in the form of the paint meter. In order for your cards to do any significant damage, they have to be painted, which depletes the paint meter. The problem is the amount of paint you use is so tiny and you are constantly tripping over paint refills, which makes the system borderline pointless. Granted, there are the Fire and Ice Flower cards that do take up a significant amount of paint, but you have plenty of other more powerful options than those two, and you can get the Fire and Ice Flower cards pre-painted anyway. If instead, the game raised the cost of paint across the board and made pre-painted cards more rare, that would make your attacks more significant, add strategy to combat, and it would make the upgrades to your paint capacity actually mean something. Speaking of upgrades, a huge sticking point in Sticker Star was how there wasn't much incentive for the player to fight random enemies. In Color Splash, the rewards for battles are cards, coins to buy even more cards, paint to refill your meter, and scrap hammers which upgrade your already huge paint capacity. Coins could have been a worthwhile reward if the game's economy wasn't absolutely busted. Coins are found everywhere and you can easily reach the coin cap in just a few hours. Despite having a pseudo EXP system with the hammer scraps and paint meter, there is still no strong incentive to fight. After about 1 or 2 upgrades, the additional paint doesn't really feel needed, nor does it really open up any new possibilities in combat. The only reason I fought random enemies was that it was faster to just fight them than it was to try running away. In the end, every battle incentive boils down to just getting more cards, but with Color Splash's battle system as basic as it is, that really isn't much of an incentive at all. We still haven't talked about the most frustrating aspect of modern Paper Mario's combat, the lack of customization. Sticker Star and Color Splash are games that want you to play in a very specific way, and don't really give you a lot of opportunities to make choices or see much character progression. HP upgrades are predetermined, you can't really customize your deck of cards since they're expendable, and boss fights are paint by numbers, forcing you to use very specific thing cards in order to win the fight. You don't have to guess what item you need to beat the boss, so it's a bit better than Sticker Star, but still isn't very fun. You are stuck fighting the boss in one specific way. Classic Paper Mario let you customize your character by using the badge system, which in addition to giving you special moves and abilities, it allowed players to play however they saw fit. Want to go on a low HP or FP run? Just invest in upgrading your badge points. Want to be ridiculously overpowered or underpowered? Equip the proper badges and you can. Want to try a no jump or partners only run? With a couple of exceptions, that's totally possible. Classic Paper Mario gave the player many options in how they wanted to build their character. Color Splash and Sticker Star don't. Now, we've made many direct comparisons to the first 2 Paper Mario games, but the truth is, Color Splash doesn't have to be like its predecessors. The series can and should change over time, but if you're going to change the system, you need to end up with something compelling and rewarding. There is a version of the card and paint system that would be an improvement. It's just not the version in Color Splash. The lack of any progression and frustrating inventory-based combat could be resolved by replacing it with some kind of deck building system, like in Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Baten Kaitos. Do you know which one it is?
I have no idea.
Great. or the Mega Man Battle Network series. A card system with a sense of permanent progression makes card collecting worthwhile and fun. I've seen some people make the suggestion of having specific combinations of cards to perform special moves, kind of like the slide system in Chain of Memories, or the combination powers in Kirby 64. Adding more customization to combat allows players to experiment and adds a little depth. They could have also gone further with the color theme and made the different color types add elemental effects to attacks, such as adding red to a hammer to give it a fire effect, or yellow to a jump to add electricity, or purple to create an ice effect. These aren't groundbreaking ideas, but they would have added a little depth to the combat system. Ultimately, the reason why Color Splash's combat doesn't work is that it just isn't very fun or engaging, and unfortunately this brings down the rest of the game. Combat is half of what this game is, and gorgeous visuals and decent exploration can only bring a game so far sometimes. A lot of these design issues come down to how Intelligent Systems abandon some of the RPG roots of the series, while still clinging onto systems that need those roots to actually work. Ripping out core genre mechanics can work, but in Color Splash's case, it made the game kinda hollow.